Hello my friends. This is Basil Nightingale, the host of Short Story Theatre. As Monty Python used to say. And now, for something completely different, we bring you Bill Russo's tale of a family's search for its proper inheritance. It's a story that travels the world over, after starting innocently enough with three young people meeting in a small mobile home, discussing the recent death of their grandfather. And now here's the cast of Short Story Theatre with Bill Russo playing the role of the writer in search of a final chapter.
After our grandfather died, Jim, Mavis, and I, the closest of kin, went to his trailer in the retirement park to decide what to do with his stuff. There was lots of it, being that the man lived just shy of 100 years. Also, there was the matter of him soldiering for some 3 decades. There were implements that once had a function, but had become antiques, like wind-up clocks and dialed telephones. Hundreds of dusty books filled several cases along the walls. There were enough old rifles, pistols, swords, uniforms, medals, and mess kits to open up an Army-Navy surplus store. The man spanned 2 full-scale wars and a dozen uprisings and conflicts. His service had taken him to all 6 continents. Some people say there are 7. But Colonel Gramps, as we used to call him in honor of his rank, always told us that since Asia and Europe are one solid connected mass, they only count as one continent. He lived and fought in so many places that the old boy would have been right at home breaking bread at any table on earth. He could easily sit at dinner with the locals and know more than enough of their lingo to say, "How are you? Pass the potatoes, please." And it sure is nice weather we're having. He could have lived anywhere in the world and got along just fine. Just how fine he did get along, we didn't find out until later. Cousin Mavis, my brother Jim, and I were the only beneficiaries of the estate, which we thought would be pretty hefty. We didn't know much about our grandfather's finances because right up to the very end he took care of all such matters by himself. He rented the mobile home that he lived in. It was in a subsidized development for elders. His expenses were small because heat, hot water, electricity, rubbish, and lawn services were all included in the few $100s he had to pay every month. Meals on Wheels were driven to him on a daily basis, packed in styrofoam containers, ready for microwaving whenever he was hungry. By the way, don't ever let anyone tell you that those meals are horrible. I saw quite a few of them, and they were usually delicious, much better than the grub I had to make for myself at my own place. The rest of his food came gratis, delivered every week in brown paper bags by volunteers from veteran services, who treated the ancient warrior with the respect that they'd give to a 5-star general. As the oldest grandchild, I was in charge of gathering up anything of value and deciding whether to keep it or sell it. Being the executor, I could pretty much do whatever I wanted. Too many times I've seen families broken up into warring factions when deciding what to do with things of a deceased relative. So I want the 3 of us to have an equal voice in this, I told the 2 of them. "Bill, that's a great idea," Mavis agreed. "Whatever you guys do is fine with me," Jim said. Jim was most like Colonel Gramps. Everybody liked him. Nobody had a bad word to say about him. Jim owned the best automobile repair shop in town and had money, but really didn't care about it. Now Mavis, she was a bit of a hard-luck gal. A 5'4" Zaftig blonde, she had no money but really did care for it. She wasn't really greedy, but she liked having nice things. Cars, clothes, big televisions, big hairdos, and 3 cats. If Maeve had married a wealthy man, she probably would have been all set. But she preferred drunks. At least it seemed that way, because all three of her ex-husbands were, in their turn, the town drunk. Despite her fancy ways, Mavis was well-liked in the community. Townsfolk were hoping that her share of the Colonel's money would ease her life. After the funeral and the burial, I wrote a check from my own account to the undertaker and a few others to cover the miscellaneous final bills. I sent word to the armed forces and Social Security, telling them to stop his benefits. 1 week later, Mavis, Jim, and I went to see Mr. Fields at the bank to find out how much money was in our grandfather's checking and savings accounts. I was pretty sure he must also have some money in money market accounts. Mr. Fields spoke softly and haltingly, as if the act of pulling words out of his throat was a great chore.
I'm sorry, folks. Sometimes my work as a banker is to deliver unpleasant news. And such is the case today. When I reimburse you for the funeral and the other checks you wrote Bill, there will be about $400 left in his checking account and about $1,600 in his savings account.
That's impossible. Our grandfather was a 30-year veteran. He retired as an OF5. That's a full colonel. And just one step below a brigadier general. $2,000? At the very least, we figured he would have saved $60,000 or $70,000. Ask my cousin Jim. Am I correct, Jim?
Mavis is right, Mr. Fields. I spent 4 years in service and I can tell you for sure that colonel's pay for a 30-year man is over $10,000 a month. And he was entitled to a pension of 85% of his base pay. So this means that the government sent a check to your bank every single month for over $8,500. And his monthly expenses were less than $1,000.
Show me the money. Show me the money, Mr. Fields.
It is true that your grandfather's check arrives in this bank every month. And it is for more than $9,000. But he lived on his Social Security check. And the amount of the check is less than $900.
Cut the crap, Mr. Fields. And show me the money. Show me the money right now.
Please sit down, Maeve. Mr. Fields will explain the situation. Mavis, he's a family friend. We don't have to intimidate him.
Mr. Fields thanked Jim for stepping in and getting Mavis off his back. Like many townspeople, he was a little bit wary of Mavis. He had heard that at about 165 pounds, she was more than a match for any of her ex-husbands and the all-too-frequent drunken brawls that had pockmarked her marriages. Before we left his office, Mr. Fields gave us one bit of information that would soon set me on a quest.
As I said, his army pension check comes here. But as per his instructions, we slice it into 4 equal pieces. One part is for his taxes. And the rest goes to 3 different addresses, in a tiny island nation, in the Pacific.
Feeling very dejected, we went back to our grandfather's trailer. "Hey, Maeve," I suggested, "why don't you take care of the selling of everything in the house that you don't want? That'll bring in a few $1,000s, and you can keep my share." Jim smiled and said, "I'll help you, Maeve. We can sell it down at my shop. I don't want any of the cash. You can have my share as well." Well, Mavis liked the idea and she thanked us. I left them to the job of getting everything ready for selling while I returned to the bank for a further discussion with Mr. Fields. I was determined to find out why my grandfather had been turning over most of his retirement check to 3 people living on an island many thousands of miles distant. Later, when I arrived back at the trailer, Mavis and Jim were busily sorting out the colonel's things into piles. In one corner, 2 long stacks of books stretched as high as the ceiling. Many of the volumes were old works about World War II. There was even a small group from World War I. "Hey, Maeve, why don't you hold on to those books for a while? They look pretty interesting. Don't sell them yet. They're pretty old. They might be worth something. I'll help you out with them when I get back."
Okay, Billy. You're the writer, so you can handle the book end of things. But what did you mean about when you get back?
I went back to the bank to have another little talk with Mr. Fields, and I got the names and addresses of the people who've been getting the money. He doesn't know why they've been getting it, but I'm going to get to the bottom of this.
But Bill, didn't Mr. Fields say it goes to some little island in the Pacific?
He did, Jimmy. And that's where I'm bound. About 500 miles west of Papua New Guinea is a little dot on the map with the improbable name of Fort Utopia. I'm going there and coming back with some of the Colonel's money or know the reason why. I left Mavis and Jim and went home to plan my trip. My most recent novel was selling well enough to put an extra $1,000 or $2 in my bank account every month. The older books added a couple thousand more, so even though I wasn't rich, I was able to say I made a comfortable living from my writing. My time was thus my own, and I had an inkling that the story that was about to unfold might be the basis of my next book, perhaps my best yet. The following day, I was on a 36-hour flight from Logan Airport in Boston to Port Moresby, the capital city of Papua New Guinea. The cost of the trip was $100 per hour, $3,600. The journey had one stop, an 8-hour layover in Hong Kong. When I finally arrived at Port Moresby Airport, I was exhausted and decided to rest up for a day or two before making the last 1,000 miles of my trip. Since my publisher had volunteered to pick up my expenses as an advance on my forthcoming book, I had no qualms about selecting the Grand Papua Hotel at $350 a night. The food was excellent, and a few hours in the afternoon sun by the pool was just the thing for me. On the third day, I was ready to take up the journey once again. I booked a flight to Honoria, the capital city of the Solomon Islands. The fare for the quick 3-hour flight was $1,000 one way, about $1 a mile. Shortly after landing, I got my first disappointment and scare of the trip. Happened when I told a local businessman that I wanted to go to Fort Utopia. He became visibly upset. He advised me to book a room in the beautiful Kitana Madana Hotel near the airport and fly back to where I came from on the first flight the next day. When I asked him why, he said, "There are many reasons you should not go. It is a very dangerous place. It is a place of greed and corruption fed by poverty. There are no flights to the island. It is some 200 miles distant. There is no shipping service. The one way to get there is tempting, but do not do it." "What's the one way to get there?" I asked. "You could get on a banana boat, but it might cost you more than the airfare from Port Moresby to Honoria." "Well, how much would it cost me?" "Could be $1,000. Could be a lot more." "Well, how much more do you think it might cost?" "Might cost you a long prison sentence. Or it might cost you your life," he answered solemnly. "Hey, now you're talking," I replied with a false bravado. "My publisher is paying for this trip and he wants a good story. Prisons and murders sell books. Please tell me about the trouble." "The banana boat that carries you through the water will also carry things like drugs, guns, and other illegal contraband. The customs officials patrol the area heavily. Confiscating these items and holding the people they capture for hefty ransoms is a major part of the economy. If ransoms are not paid, they don't make the criminal serve the rest of his sentence, they just shoot him in the head." Although I was certainly impressed by the dangers I might have to face in the last part of my trip, I was fully committed to doing it. So, with the assistance of my newfound friend, I packed a survival kit for a 200-mile sail on top of a dangerous ocean that masquerades as a gentle blue sea, but can instantly pitch a tsunami at an island chain. It did just that a few months before my visit. Almost a dozen people were killed in the super wave generated by one of the earthquakes that regularly rock the volcano-studded Solomon Islands. When I write the book about this adventure, there'll be whole chapters devoted to battles with customs officials and perhaps attacks by pirates. But in truth, nothing happened. The men of the boat were kind to me and seemed to be nothing more than businessmen in a place where the only business a man can run is an illegal one. I thought the banana boat was going to be some unpowered, leaky old wooden sailing vessel that would barely do 5 knots. Instead, it was a modern steel ship that covered the 200 miles in less than 10 hours. The boat docked, and I bid the sailors good luck and goodbye and thanked them for a fine ride. The entire island was not more than a few miles in circumference, and there was but one settlement, a village of perhaps 500 people. The center of town had a handful of shops, a post office, a police station, a restaurant, and about 12 bars. I walked the village streets and chatted with the people. They were all friendly, and most spoke very good English. It was a long time between meals and I was hungry. So I went into the first saloon I saw that also served food. The place was called the Hershey Bar. I ate a tasty meal of fish and breadfruit. For dessert, the owner, a pleasant, matronly-looking woman, brought me bananas served with caramel. As I was a foreigner and a writer, she was very interested in speaking with me. When we got deeper into conversation, she asked me if she could join me. It would be an honor, I replied. She asked many questions about the United States. She wondered if I knew George Clooney, the Kardashians, or Lady Gaga, or Tom Cruise. Nobody knows those people, I explained to her. They're not real people like we are. They don't walk down the streets of a city. They barely leave their mansions unless accompanied by a dozen or more of their herd. They don't drive their own cars. They don't cook their own food. Their faces are not allowed to age like the rest of us. They have everything fixed. All the old men wear thick wigs. The Star Trek guy, William Shatner, big rug. She laughed and laughed as I made fun of the stars. I switched gears without taking a breath and asked her for information on the 3 people who had been receiving my grandfather's money for the last 50 years. She blanched and became silent. I cannot speak of this. Do not say that we have spoken. Do not tell anyone that I have said anything. If you promise this, I will give you guidance. I made my solemn promise to her, and she directed me to the largest house in town. It was a 3-story home of about 15 rooms. She told me to knock on the door and tell the person who answers that I am bringing a message from the soldiers. She assured me that the word soldiers would get me through the door. A short time later, I was let into the big house. A balding, large man wearing blue jeans, sandals, and a Grateful Dead t-shirt led me up a set of stairs to a spacious sitting room on the 2nd floor. "Sit down," said the old guy as he pushed me towards a black leather couch. The gold chains around his neck swished and bumped into each other as he swung his arms. While I was still debating whether I wanted to push back at the guy, an ancient woman walked unsteadily into the room, supported at each elbow by 2 more old guys dressed the same as the first. The last time I saw anything as withered and time-beaten as that old crone's face was the gnarled bark of a 400-year-old diseased elm tree that I spotted on a winter's trek through the Allagash country of northern Maine. Through lips as thin as the pages of an original Gutenberg Bible she spoke. "What do you know of the soldiers?" she asked me. I decided to get straight to the point, explaining that my grandfather had recently died and that I was the executor of the estate. I demanded to know why 3/4 of his check has been sent to 3 women in Honoria. "If he's dead, it's over. Go back to your own land and take your chocolate bars with you." "Chocolate bars? What are you blabbing about?" "Leave me my sons," she said to the 3 old guys, who were probably 30 years or more younger than she was, but they were still old guys. They left slowly, trying to be as fierce as possible, reassuring the crone that they would burst in instantly and throttle me if I tried anything. "If the colonel is dead, then it is truly over. Of all the soldier boys and all the chocolate whores, I am the last, and soon I too will be gone." Over the next hour, she told me her story slowly and tearfully. It began, she said, during the time of the escalation of the conflict that would grow to global proportions and be named the Second World War. "We were young girls coming into bloom at a time when there were no men. All of the youths had been taken away to serve in somebody's army. The town was even smaller then. There were only a handful of young girls here. We had no money and no food. Clothing was scarce. The village was populated mostly by the very young and the very old. The soldier boys were so handsome, we gave ourselves for a chocolate bar." Look, ma'am, blood runs hot in both young men and young women. If you did something with a soldier, I suspect it was for a reason other than a chocolate bar. "Don't be obtuse! The chocolate bar is just a symbol, you fool. It's a metaphor for what the soldiers had. A home far away in a land of riches where people have cars, food, clothing, films at a cinema, and yes, chocolate bars. We had nothing. We accepted the chocolate bar and gave the soldiers the use of our body, but when they left, they discarded us. We were expected to go back to our old life. We got something, though. We got something. My 2 friends and I got the addresses of some of the men who had lusted after us. When the war was over, we wrote to the soldiers. We told them we had become pregnant with their child. We asked for money. Most of them ignored us. We did not pursue them, but some of the men had hearts that had not turned to stone. They did the right thing. They sent us money. Your grandfather, the colonel, was one of the good men. He had kept steady company with 3 women here on Fort Utopia Island, myself included. He agreed to send us all money to help raise our children. Kids grow up, lady. If you had any war children, they would have become adults decades ago. Why did you keep taking the money? Because we had none. In the 1950s, the local government went bankrupt. In the 1960s, a tsunami wiped out every building in the village and killed 27 people. It was always something. We needed the money. I have used the money for the good of the island and my people. So you and 2 other women told my grandfather he was the father of your children. And yet as I walked through your village today, I saw only straight-haired people. The people of my family have curly hair. There's never been one of us born without curly hair. If the Colonel's seed were here, I would have seen evidence of it. We lied. We had to, don't you get it? They told us they loved us. They didn't. We were just chocolate bar whores to them. I wanted to go to America with my soldier boy. He would not have me. At one time I was getting checks from 6 soldiers all at once. They all thought I bore them a child. They're all dead. Your grandfather was the last. Go home, soldier boy. You will still have your big car, your beautiful home, your giant television, while I still have nothing but the memory of beautiful young men who gave me chocolate bars and told me they loved me. I did go home. I left that very afternoon. And though I thought I had some material for a few chapters of a new book, I didn't have a finish. My final talk with the ancient woman might have been an ending for her, but it was not an ending for my novel. When I got back home, I met Mavis and Jimmy at the repair shop. They had kept a few mementos of our grandfather, but had sold most everything, and they netted $8,000. Mavis was very happy. She had already made plans for a little plastic surgery to eliminate a second chin that was becoming more prominent each year. What about the books, I asked. There might be 1 or 2 that are worth something.
We haven't had a chance to look at them, Billy. They are all boxed up in Jimmy's office, if you want to take them.
I said I did, and the 3 of us loaded them into my car. I drove over to my publisher's office and had a couple of the mailroom people bring the books into the conference room where I could look them over. Those books, those fabulous books in Granddad's unique collection. They provided me with the finish to my story. I used to have to sell hundreds and hundreds of books every month to make $1,000, maybe $2,000 on a good month. But the very first book in Granddad's stack was titled Tibet. Tibet, written by John Claude White in 1908. We sold that at auction for $30,000. The second volume I plucked from the pile was a first edition signed copy of New Hampshire by Robert Frost. We sold that one for $50,000. It turned out that the Colonel's book collection is worth millions. Mavis has got new teeth, a new chin, new boobs, a new car, and a new drunken husband. She's just about the happiest woman on earth. Jimmy still works in his shop. He still does not care about money, and he's just about the happiest man on earth. Me? I still stay up all night writing 3,000 or 4,000 words that I hope somebody will read. There's one other thing that I write. Once a month, I write a check to an ancient lady on a small island in the Pacific. It's just the right thing to do. At Christmas, I got a card from her. It said, "Thanks, soldier boy, from an old chocolate bar whore who loves you."
And so closes In Search of a Final Chapter, written and performed by Bill Russo with the cast of Short Story Theatre. If you've enjoyed our play, please hit a like button, share it, and tell somebody else about our unique little theatre project. Short Story Theatre's home network is Spreaker, and our work is available free of charge on iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, and all of the audio-video sites of the World Wide Web. This is Basil Nightingale. Thanks for listening. And please come back again real soon. Won't you?